Good evening. Welcome to this Unitarian Universalist Church, which includes our congregation here in Birmingham, our folks in Tuscaloosa, who I was with this morning, and all of our folks online. We are delighted that you have joined us for this Christmas Eve service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are today, and wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. To all who are here this morning, welcome home. Please rise in body or spirit for the lighting of the chalice. We gather together on this Christmas Eve as fellow sojourners, looking for light, for hope, for peace, and for love. We gather as people from many backgrounds, many beliefs, many cultures, and many spiritual paths. But as we light this chalice, we gather as one body, looking to the Nativity for its message for all humanity. Its message that there is light, there is hope, there is peace, and there is love. You may be seated. Right on time. May I? It's okay. You're great. At this time, I'd like to invite John and Pam Powell up to light our Advent wreath.
The places of candles upon a circle of evergreens is an age-old tradition. Lighting additional candles each day or week as the light wanes has been a part of human rituals for centuries upon centuries. We are warmed by the glow. We are reminded that the wheel of the season will turn, and brilliant, lengthening days will return. The original Advent wreath in the Christian tradition dates back to the 16th century and included a candle for each of the 24 days leading up to Christmas. For us, here in this time, the circle of evergreens reminds us that life and love will never end. We light candles each week with anticipation, as we know a new season will soon be here. Days will become longer, and we will know the warmth of the candles will soon be replaced by the warmth of the sun. As the wheel of the seasons turn, and as we are brought closer and closer to the sun, we are reminded of how love is the source of compassion and warmth. Love animates our days, informs our decisions, and quickens our hearts. This fourth Advent candle represents all we hold dear, our precious memories, our caring for one another, and our beautiful planet that sustains us. Love knows us, holds us, and nurtures us. May love find us this Advent season as we rest here for a moment, take in the stillness, and be present to ourselves and those around us. We light the candle of love.
Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing Joy to the World. The words are in your order of service. Our first reading is from the Gospel according to Luke. In those days, Caesar Augustus declared that everyone throughout the empire should be enrolled in the tax lists. This first enrollment occurred when Quirinius governed Syria. Everyone went to their own cities to be enrolled. Since Joseph belonged to David's house and family line, he went up from the city of Nazareth in Galilee to David's city called Bethlehem in Judea. He went to be enrolled together with Mary, who was promised to him in marriage and who was pregnant. While they were there, the time came for Mary to have her baby. She gave birth to her firstborn son, wrapped him snugly, and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the guest house. Our second reading comes from the Gospel according to Matthew. Now the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found to be pregnant from the Holy Spirit. Her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to divorce her quietly. But just when he had resolved to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." All this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. "Look, the young woman shall become pregnant and give birth to a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel," which means God is with us. When Joseph awoke from sleep, He did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took her as his wife, but had no marital relations with her until she had given birth to a son, and he named him Jesus. Please remain seated and join together in singing our Unitarian Universalist Christmas carol, "It Came Upon a Midnight Clear."
Good evening. So, if you'd like to come forward for the story, you can, but you're welcome to stay in your seats with your families if you'd like to. Totally up to you. I am not surprised. Hello, friends. So, I have a story to share with you all this evening. It might be one you're a little familiar with. So, you ready? Hi, friends. Once upon a time, a baby was born. And even before that baby was born, there were people who were waiting and wishing and hoping for that baby. The people who were waiting and wishing and hoping for that baby didn't exactly know what that baby would be like. No, you never know, right? It could be, you never know. And so they wondered, would the baby have a smile so warm that it could melt the coldest snow and ice? That would be a pretty cool smile. Would the baby have a voice so strong that it could shake the very mountains? Would the baby be so courageous that all would be comforted even during the most ferocious storms? Would the baby show the world so much love that peace would settle into even the most hardened hearts? But even as they asked these questions, as they imagined what the baby might be like, the people were waiting and wishing and hoping, for the baby already believed that the baby would indeed have a warm smile, a strong voice, a courageous spirit, and a loving heart. And they weren't wrong. When Jesus was born, his tiny body was wrapped up to keep out the cold. He was laid down on straw in a trough that was used to feed the animals inside a barn. His young parents, proud and exhausted, had been forced to take a long journey far from home. Jesus' parents were two of the people who had been waiting and wishing and hoping for him to be born. But there were people who had been waiting and wishing and hoping for Jesus to come. These people saw hurt and suffering in the world, and they believed that this new baby Jesus could use his voice to spread a message of love and peace, and they knew it would take courage for him to do so. But Jesus wasn't the only baby that people have waited and wished and hoped for, right? I'm going to tell you something. Everyone probably waited and wished and hoped for each of you too. Once upon a time, you were born. But even before you were born, there were people who were waiting and wishing and hoping for you. Those people who were wishing and waiting and hoping for you didn't know exactly who you would be either. So they wondered, would you be kind? Would you be brave? Yep. Would you show love? Would you spread peace and joy? Oh, this sounds good. But even as they asked these questions, as the people who were waiting and wishing and hoping for you imagined what you might be like, what kind of person you might grow up to be, they already believed that you would be kind and that you would be brave and loving and that you would spread peace and joy in our world. They knew that you could help ease the suffering and hurt in the world and that you would speak out against violence and oppression. And they weren't wrong. The end. So if you all want to head back to your seats, we'll finish up the service.
Please rise in body or spirit and join together in singing Sing We Now of Christmas.
Sing, ring the well, the child is born, oh well. Good evening. Our church is supported by those who call our church home and by those who support the efforts of our church to change our world for the better. Tonight, our special offering funds the Minister's Discretionary Fund, a descendant of the historic Parsons Purse, funds donated to the cleric to be used for the good of others in the congregation or the community at large. Examples of use this past year include help with utility bills, daycare expenses, groceries, clothing, medical expenses, and helping folks through tough life transitions. In the spirit of this blessed season, we hope you will be generous. Our Venmo is at UUCBHAM. Thank you for your generous support of our church. May we give in love and in hope.
Let us join our hearts and minds together in the spirit of meditation and prayer. May these moments of quiet lead us to the heart of the season, which is peace. May we breathe deeply of peace in this quiet place, relax into its warmth, know we are safe here, and let us open our hearts to this evening's story. Like the wandering couple, may we find that our greatest trials issue forth from our greatest joys. Like the harried innkeeper, may we find ways to be of help to others. Like the lumbering beasts, may we be silent witnesses to the unfathomable glory of life. Like the shepherds on the hill, may we know that we need never be afraid. Like the journeying wise people, may we always have the courage to follow our stars. And like the angels, may we cry peace to a troubled world. Holy One, to these prayers for our own transformation, we add our prayers for all who suffer and grieve this evening. May they find comfort. And we add our prayers for all of those involved in war. May they be safe. And may this season of peace and goodwill nudge our world toward its ideals, for then will Christmas truly dawn. Let us take a moment of silence together. Amen, and blessed be. Please remain seated and join together in our meditation hymn, I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. We'll let Zoe play through it once, because it's a kind of unfamiliar tune. Let us join together. Our third reading from this evening is from my colleague and friend, Reverend Dan Schatz. He writes a Christmas poem every year, and every year it is exactly what I need to hear, so I hope you will enjoy it. Angels sang of peace. We heard them out above the fields, first whispers, then a rising throng, singing, shouting, thrilling, a promise, a prayer, a plea. Peace. On earth, peace. So we followed a star to an infant child, all wrapped in stable rags, shared the news angels had brought us, and went upon our way. But in my heart, though years have gone, choirs never stilled. Angels sang of peace, a promise, a prayer, a plea. On earth, peace.
Now Christmas
This evening, we honor the theological diversity inherent within our congregation by celebrating that baby born so long ago. So I ask you, and I would like you to just say it into the room, but what one word describing Jesus inspires or empowers you? Lots of good choices. For me, the word that has been inspiring me of late is peace. Because I believe that Jesus was a pacifist, but I'm about to give you my reasons why. This season of darkness, we are reminded of that miracle birth so many centuries ago, one still celebrated all over the world on this magical night, lit by the power of a single star, or at least a predominant star, right? The contents of that cradle have forever shaped our culture, our values, and the ways in which we radically love and include one another. But that night, in those first hours of his birth, Jesus had needs that all other babies have. As much as we would like to erase this into history, Jesus needed to be fed, Jesus needed to be cradled, Jesus needed to be cared for by his community. His parents were exhausted, no matter what interpretation of the story you have in mind. And he likely fussed. But we know from what we know historically that there is no way his parents would have been alone that night. There would have been a midwife and the innkeeper in his inn and/or Joseph's whole family, depending on your interpretation. But they would have been there, taking turns to hold the baby, care for the mother, and entertain the father. I'm not sure what the father would need there, but I'm sure something. Peace of mind, if anything. But all they would have been doing is coming together to foster peace in that stable that night. That holy night forever shaped our views on peace, reminding us that if we come together in love, we too can bring about peace on earth. The stories of the birth of Jesus written by Matthew and Luke were written decades after Jesus' birth. They were never intended to be historical accounts. Typical for their time, the authors of these two manuscripts were writing with a purpose. Luke, as a Gentile, depicted Jesus as a prophet of the people, and thus sent shepherds to welcome Jesus' humble beginnings. Matthew, as a Jewish author, wrote his birth narrative to illustrate Jesus as King of the Jews, receiving gifts from astrologers, showcasing Jewish values, and fulfilling Jewish prophecies. One of the Jewish prophecies frequently mentioned is from the prophet Isaiah chapter 9. It reads this: "A child has been born for us. We have been given a son who will be our ruler. His names will be Wonderful Advisor and Mighty God, Eternal Father and Prince of Peace. His power will never end. Peace will last forever." Now, do I think that the prophecies from the ancient Jewish prophets refer to Jesus? No, I do not. But I do believe that those prophecies were searching for heroes, for liberators, for leaders to save them from oppression and annihilation. And I believe that the people around Jesus were always looking for those people. Jesus, as a young Jewish man, was well versed in the sacred texts of his people. I doubt he was trying to fulfill those prophecies like a checklist, but he no doubt understood what leadership looked like in his era. He understood, as we have documented through stories and narratives, that the path of justice and liberation can be attained with nonviolence. Sometimes. In honor of the life of Jesus, the Christmas season frequently uplifts the notion of peace as our ideal. Peace is woven throughout our hymns, and our traditions this season. We light an entire candle on the Advent wreath for peace every year. And many of those representations are in the hymns that we have sung today. In both Hebrew and Christian scriptures, peace is lauded as the ideal form of human interaction. Peace within ourselves, peace among others, and an absence of war and enemies. To be peaceful is to practice nonviolence, but also to inquire about the well-being of others in society. What are the ways that you perpetuate peace? In the books of the prophets, peace is an ethical standard, and God is credited for destroying the weapons of the Jewish people and their enemies alike. God is not a fan of weapons. Matthew and Luke present a militantly nonviolent and unarmed Jesus who teaches us to love our enemies. And in the first 3 centuries of Christianity, Christians were not permitted to kill others even while serving in the military, at least for the first 3 centuries. Then, a Roman emperor named Constantine converted to Christianity in 312. He believed he had been given a mission from Jesus himself, who provided him a Christian symbol, the cross, and said, "In hoc signo vince," or translated to current-day English, "In this sign conquer." Constantine forcibly converted all of his troops and waged war with his Christian army. By the 11th century, Christian soldiers were marching on Jerusalem solely on the fact that Muslims lived there. Judaism and Islam are no strangers to violence either. The Hebrew scriptures are full of references to battles long ago, both defensive and offensive, like the Battle of Jericho, and, as we discussed a couple weeks ago, the Maccabees. And while our world unfortunately makes easy parallels between violence and Islam due to modern events, like all of these religious traditions, Islam's sacred texts are just as much filled with peace and love of neighbor as the others are. Most religions have a sort of extremists, and we Unitarian Universalists are included in that list. What we don't have in Unitarian Universalism is a history of initiating violence as a group. We have been, from the very beginning, peacemakers. We have our share of martyrs, including ones in recent history, Reverend James Reeb and Viola Liuzzo, who died in Selma during the Civil Rights Movement. And it's written right there in our principles, that 6th principle, that we promote a goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. In our current form, we are so conflict aware and sometimes conflict avoidant that we try to resolve church conflicts with peaceful discussion and reconciliation. We are countercultural in our approach to conflict. That is not how most people deal with it. Universalists, in their history, were so nonviolent they could not even imagine a hell. And Unitarians were so nonviolent they struggled to see the crucifixion as anything but government-sponsored violence. However, Unitarians and Universalists realized over time that sometimes violence is the only path to liberation and eventual peace. Unitarians and Universalists supported World War I. They financed John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry in an attempt to abolish slavery, and so many other examples. We have Unitarian Universalists who serve in our military today. We are not a pacifist faith. That would create a dogma among us, and we don't require you to believe anything, everything, or even one thing to be a part of this community. And yet, we hope to be promoters of peace. UU minister Reverend John Behrens said this: Unitarian Universalism can be a healing presence in society. We are not a peace church. We are not a war church. We are a religious community of both pacifists and pragmatists, taking different spiritual paths toward the same common goal, a world of greater justice and peace. Unitarian Universalists are frequently the defenders of all people living under oppression. We as a collective have been there, protesting, chanting, during sit-ins and sermons, writing letters to legislators and editors, demanding and insisting upon liberation. When we as a collective of Unitarian Universalists say, enough, we mean it. We strive for peace, and much of that we owe to this baby we are celebrating today, Jesus, the teacher of Nazareth, even if his relationship to peace is a bit complicated. Surprisingly, not everyone agrees that Jesus was a pacifist. And so, as I was preparing this sermon in what I thought at the time would be an easy home run about Jesus, the purveyor of peace, I met with two of my Christian colleagues, both clergy, and they disagreed about whether Jesus was a pacifist. One of them said, well, Jesus overturned tables and used very strong language, and in a couple instances encouraged the use of swords. Well, and my other colleague, Reverend J. Gregory Clark, who is the hub organizer for Faith in Action, many of you know him, he said these verses claim to show a violent Jesus emphasize the polarizing nature of the gospel, suggesting that the truth can indeed divide families as often as it brings them together, and that even those under the same roof, sharing similar life experience, can be split on what they believe. How many of you are going to have that experience over Christmas dinner in the next few hours? Yeah, we understand what that's like, because when we gather as this congregation, we do not gather with the assumption that we agree with one another. And so we can practice for those possibly awkward Christmas dinners. Jesus was a personal inspiration to me in the last few months especially. In November, as many of you know, I was in the middle of some awkward conversations about the conflict in the Middle East. I had publicly and controversially called for ceasefire and peace, actions that align with my religious principles, and this offended some. My actions invited a lot of comments, most of which I did not request. I was told that if I had been born 70 years earlier, I would have been a hippie. Any hippies in the room? No one? Oh, there's a few, admitting yourselves. I'm in good company among the hippies. I was also told that no one called for peace when the United States was attacked on September 11th, 2001. We certainly did. I remember gathering in a march with thousands of others in Oklahoma City, asking our government why they were attacking a country, especially one that had nothing to do with the attack. How many of you have been a part of a peaceful protest in response to violence? Thank you. For a long time, I tried to rationalize war, to put this current war in the Middle East alongside other wars throughout history, from revolutions overthrowing oppression to people defending themselves from attack. I tried to rationalize all the horrible things that one set of people was doing to the other set of people and vice versa. I failed. I have no rationale. And it was also a tough realization going back through history to accept that none of us would be here today without both oppressive and revolutionary forms of violence that brought our ancestors together. I am not so naive to believe that peace is practical at this stage in the conflict in the Middle East. Both sides have been killing one another for decades. There has never been a true ceasefire. But what I do believe, and what I believe Jesus and our Unitarian Universalist tradition call us to believe, is that peace should always be the aspiration for all of us around the world to live in safety without fear of domestic or international terrorism is a worthwhile aim, right? Is that too much to ask? We should always hope for peace. Peace is not a threat to other people. Peace is not an ultimatum. Peace is an ideal and a hope for a better tomorrow. Peace should always be an option. Preaching peace isn't a popular position. We are wired as humans to defend and protect those people we love. And most of our peaceful prophets have been assassinated because nonviolent protest and liberation is seen as countercultural. The Reverend Martin Luther King taught that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. And sometimes these calls for peace come from unexpected places. We expect Martin Luther King, but we don't expect them from heavy metal musicians. Has anyone heard of the band Slipknot? Yes? As Corey Taylor, the lead vocalist for the band Slipknot, recently said, "Look, there's a very clear list of things you should be offended by. Anything racist or anything that has to do with trying to kill people. Everything else is open to interpretation, and it all depends on where you grew up, who you grew up with, and what you think in your own head." Now, yes, I did have to censor that a little bit, but I still thought it was a good quote. We call for peace not because it is easy or because it is popular or even, in this case, because it is rational. Deep within our hearts, we recognize calling for peace makes us think about the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. And also, in the words of Reverend King, the ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Tonight, I invite you. I've given you some options. Jesus' relationship to peace, Unitarian Universalist relationship to peace, whatever you decide, I invite you to think about and reflect on tonight. What is your relationship to peace? May you consider your relationship to peace and how you hold that belief while affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. May we remember this holy night the peace that baby taught us, hoping for peace in our community and all around the world. To kindness and peace, the things we need most. Amen. At this time, if you would please get your candle for our last hymn together, remember to tilt the unlit candle as we spread the light around the room. Unfortunately, I still have to be in the light so the folks online can see me. But I want you to take a moment and look around at the beauty of this room. And remembering that behind each of those lights is one of our beautiful folks who are a part of our community, spreading light and peace to the world. Our benediction this evening is from the Reverend Howard Thurman. When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flocks, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among the people, to make music in the heart. I invite you to sit in the beauty as long as you wish, and when you are ready, Please blow out your candle and join us in the narthex for dessert. Merry Christmas.